Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to How to Perfect Your Pitch with Tim Fortescue. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a program manager at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling entrepreneurs from all over the world to realize their maximum potentials and grow. As you may have just seen in the chat, the Nasdaq Center, along with our partner Mentor Cloud, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. You can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat. Mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success is dependent on it. Now, none of what we do here at the center could be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, and BPM. We're humbled by their contributions. Quick housekeeping item, we're going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So please submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We hope to get to them all. Now, during these still unique times, we're curious on how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs we work with. So before we get started, I'm going to start by launching a quick poll to let us know how you're doing. So just take a moment and let us know. It looks like optimism's on the rise, but totally understand that there's still some survival mode out there and just a little bit of anxiety. So thank you for your poll results. I'm going to end this and share these results. So it looks like optimism's at the top of the key, but totally understand that some of you have just some survival mode, anxiety, and a little fear out there. So hopefully this presentation will help alleviate some of those feelings. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome in the chat to our special guest today. Tim Fortescue is the founder and coach at 40 Watt Coaching and a very close friend of the center. I'm very looking forward to this. Tim, you're the man, and over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Colin. And thanks to everyone who's joining from around the world. You started a company. You know the potential it has to change the world. You work long hours because you're committed to seeing it become a reality. But here's the catch. How do you distill all those things you know and all those things you feel and all those things you do into a short pitch? Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15, maybe 2 minutes, maybe an elevator ride. It's hard. There's a lot of stuff, and you know more stuff about your company than maybe anyone else in the world, aside from your co-founders, if you have a co-founder. So today, we're going to talk about how do you choose what to put into your pitch? And more specifically, how do you form a connection through your communication, through your storytelling with your audience, whether it's an investor, a customer, or a potential teammate or potential partner. Before we get going, I think it's important to note that there is a ton of stuff online and out there about how to perfect your pitch. In preparation for this talk, I thought, let me just see if I Google perfect pitch or perfecting my pitch, what comes up. And it was a lot on how to make your perfect pitch deck, how to make your slides pop. It was a ton on slide decks, a lot on technical jargon and what the investor may actually want to see. So purposely, or maybe coincidentally, I decided we're not going to go in that direction, and we're going to focus our time more on how to take your message, craft it, and connect emotionally, how to be a better storyteller, and how to deliver better. As Colin mentioned, I'm a friend of the Nasdaq Center. Since it opened in 2016, I've been working with the Milestone Maker program, which, if you're not familiar, it's a group of entrepreneurs that goes through a multi-week process in preparation for taking their businesses or their concepts to the next level. And I've been working with folks in that program since 2016 on their pitch or their story. And what I've found working with them, as well as people in tech companies, large and small in Silicon Valley, is that there's a unique set of things, of best practices that make public speaking as well as pitching go from average to good, good to great. And so today we're going to capture 8 different best practices, some of them with sub-bullets, as we go today. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. If you notice, there's a light bulb on a lot of the slides. I thought it was important to get my logo. I started my own coaching business earlier this year. So I've been on my own since January, and I'm excited to be a small business owner myself. Or you could call myself a founder, which still feels kind of strange, but exciting. Here are the 8 things we're going to cover today. And you can see I've split it into a combination of knowing yourself and knowing your audience. And we're going to start with knowing your audience. Now, the reason I bring up know your audience is because before you know who the audience is, how can you really determine how you're going to tailor your pitch? And it's important to note that your pitch is your pitch. Your story is your story, but it adapts. It adapts based on who you're speaking to. So let's start with knowing your audience. And the first one being paint the problem clearly. This is key. Now, as I've worked with milestone makers or entrepreneurs or even people presenting to large audiences, often one of the first pitfalls I see is the founder knows so much about the company that we lose sight of the pain point, of the basic problem that we're helping solve. Or we assume that it's obvious, or it might be evident to the person we're speaking to. Well, in many cases, it's not. Certainly not to the degree that you're familiar with it. So first identify, who is this? Is it an investor? If so, what's their background? Is it a potential customer, early adopter? What is their background, and what are they showing up with? Or is it a potential co-founder, partner, or early team member that would be joining you potentially? And that matters because, as I said, the story is the story. However, your approach changes. How much you describe the problem changes. For example, an investor might not even be aware of your pain point or your problem. So spending time up front on describing it in plain terms, and as you can see in the bottom of the slide, I mean plain terms, meaning could you go to your next door neighbor and describe it? And would that person, assuming that person isn't your co-founder, would that person be able to follow along? It could even be your grandmother, your parents, your friend from high school who does not work in the same industry as you. Test it on people who don't work with you. Describe the problem. Narrow it down to the experience of one end user of your service or your product. And if you've done that successfully, you'll have grounded your pitch in a way that will allow people to follow along as you describe details. So that's for investors. With customers, it's a little different. You can expect your customer probably understands the pain point. Otherwise, why would they be your customer? Why would they be your potential early adopter or client? But don't skip over selling the pain point or describing it. It still makes sense to ground the pain point so that you're connecting emotionally right from the beginning. And as you're doing that, you're grounding it so the details land better. So paint the problem clearly, tailor it based on who your audience is. The next part is, now that we've got the problem painted, let's add some juice. Let's add some pop to the situation. Opening strong. If anybody in the audience has worked with me, if any of the former milestone makers or any person in the Bay Area or around the world who's worked with me before, you'll know that this is my favorite part of public speaking or pitching. It's how do you grab attention right from the beginning? And the first step is knowing who your audience is. On this slide, you can see I've got 6 different ways to open strong, but there's an infinite amount of ways to open in a way that connects with your audience right away, grabs and hooks attention so that they're with you when they want to take this journey through the rest of your pitch. So again, I'll cover 6, but be thinking in your mind, the goal here is be different. A little different than everyone else that this investor or this customer may be listening to. It could be something you're physically doing. It could be giving them a demo right up front, if it makes sense. It could be putting your product right in their hand, letting them experience the service right away, do a little test run. It could be showing an image that grabs their attention, or it could be any of a number of these 6 things. And we're going to walk through these 6 things together. Before I do that, I want you to think high level. What is the value of a good opener? When I'm reading an article, when I'm scrolling through my feed, and perhaps I see something, a headline that catches my attention, what I might do is click in and see the beginning. And subconsciously, I'm making a decision. Do I want to keep reading or not? In some cases, it's no, and I'll scroll to the next thing. In other cases, it's yes. And it's usually because the author or the writer captured my attention in the first sentence. It's the same thing for you when you're pitching. Capture the attention right away. And I'll give you one more high-level thing before we get down into the details of these techniques. Think about if you're watching a show on a streaming service. I think about last night, I watched a show on HBO Go. And this little tab in the bottom right corner pops up. It says, skip intro. And I click skip intro almost every time. Maybe I watch the first intro so I can hear what the song sounds like, but usually I'm skipping that intro every time. And why? It's because I want action. I want to get right in. I want to know what happens. I want to know maybe I want to know how this show goes if it's the first episode. It's the same for you. Just the difference is the intro, rather than being a theme song, might just be your agenda or the normal things that people say, pleasantries up front. Now, there's a place for it, but I think there's a stronger place for starting with power, where the first words out of your mouth grab the attention of your audience. So I had to think, if I'm going to teach these 6 topics without being in a workshop or being in one-on-one coaching scenario, I'm going to need to be the one demoing. And usually the way I'd be doing this is it's a workshop. You'd be with me on Zoom, or we'd be in the same room, maybe at the Nasdaq Center, downtown San Francisco, or you and I would be sitting together one-on-one. But I can't really do that through this format because I can't quite see you. And interaction's a bit of a barrier. So I'm going to demo more of these than I typically would. And if I'm going to demo, I had to pick a product or service to think, all right, if I was pitching this product or service, how would it go? And I looked around in the room I was in last night, actually, as I thought about what do I want to use. And I saw this air purifier in the corner of my bedroom, actually, and it's called Molecule. Maybe some are familiar with this product. We love it. My wife and I love it. And I wasn't too aware of it until I became a client. So I am in no way connected to Molecule. I don't have, maybe they'll see this afterwards and say, hey, we need you as a pitch person, or come coach us. I have no idea. I just looked in the corner and I saw Molecule. I saw that might be a cool thing to use as my demo to go through these techniques. So you're going to hear a variety of techniques if I was opening my pitch on Molecule. And for those of you who don't know, it's an air purifier that is designed really well and convenient in that you can control it through your app. In the West Coast, Northern California, and particularly dealing with wildfires, air purification is a big deal. And we have children at home. My wife and I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1-year-old at home. And air quality is obviously, it's something that's on our mind, especially when there's smoke in the air. So if we were to start with pitching with a number, here's how it might go. 7 million people a year die from air pollution related deaths. And it's not just outside air. We need a new way to protect our families in our homes. Pause. Think about it. What was the number I started with? You can write it in the chat. I probably, actually, here it is. Let me see if anybody's written it in the chat. Bam. Thank you, Philly S. 7 million right away. 7 million was my data point. And I just said it like it was in italics. I tried my best in bold and italics. I wanted to feel that number. I wanted you to feel that number. And hopefully it came across that way. Here's another way to say the same opener. 7 million. That's the number of air pollution related deaths globally each year. And it's not just outside, it's inside also. We need a new way. So I'll pause right there. What I did there was I put, in my mind, I put 7 million as if it were the first word in the first sentence of the first paragraph of this book we're reading. And I said it like I wanted it to fly off the page. You can choose the way you like to emphasize the number, but get it early, get it up front. Sometimes when I coach clients to do this, they'll get the number in the first sentence or two, but there's a pretty big lead in. And that sometimes just loses a bit of the power because it's buried. It's kind of like burying the lead. So if you like starting with a data point, by the way, there's a reason it's my number one thing on this list. It's not random. I think it's probably my favorite. If you're going to start with a pitch, is start with a number and get it out front and be bold with it. Speaking of be bold, here's another way to start. It's just start with a bold statement. Here's how that might look. When it comes to the air we breathe, filtration alone is not purification. I'll pause. The reason that matters, if you check out Molecule's site like I did, is that that's part of the value proposition. Their value proposition is there's a lot of filters on the market, but there's a difference between filtration and purification. So if that is something I want to get out in front, I might just lead with it. No context needed. I just want to start in with something that you feel and you can grab onto right away. So that's an example of a bold statement. And again, you can say that statement, pause after it, and then transition to, we're here today to talk about a solution we created that's different. And as I dug into what actually makes my molecule different, there's the technology they call PECO, P-E-C-O, that is an acronym I can't remember off the top of my head, but their technology is different. It's not just filtration, it's purification. So when it comes to the air we breathe, filtration alone is not purification. That's your bold statement. Think about for your business. What's your bold statement? What could you use? I bet there's something. And oftentimes, I didn't mention this, in a pitch deck or in a slide deck of any type, the bold statement or the number is often buried in the middle of the slide deck. I call it the rule of slide 12. I used to say this of slide 13. I would work one-on-one with a client at a tech company or an entrepreneur, and I'd be digging through the slide deck with them, just looking to see what's the juicy stuff we've got to help make your beginning pop. And I'd find something around slide 12, it's 13, 14, or 15. And it was this fantastic statistic, or several of them. And I'd say, what if we take that number, that percentage, or whatever the number was, let's put it at the very beginning, and we let that be our opener. And 9 times out of 10, it became the solution we used. It just became a matter of, do we like this better than another option? Because there's so many different ways to connect. And it's all goes back to, who is my audience and what's going to make this problem statement land with them. So a quote, let's go on to the next one. If you can pull a famous quote or something that sounds wise from a famous author, or in this case, a 94-year-old comedian who's also a speechwriter that specializes in one-liners, I looked up, could I find a quote about air pollution? And I found one that I thought might be interesting at the beginning of a pitch. Here it is. There's so much pollution in the air right now that if it weren't for our lungs, there'd be no place to put it all. That's from Robert Orban, a 94-year-old comedian, speechwriter, and master of the one-liner. Pause right there. So that could be an opening slide of the pitch deck. It could be something you just say as a way to grab and ground everyone at the beginning. Think about, for you, what would be the quote? What stands out for you? What's your industry? Is there something you can grab onto to anchor everybody with a quote at the beginning? Next one is a fantastic one. And again, it depends on the format you're in. If you're at a pitch contest, you probably don't have the opportunity to get interactive with a question where you're asking the audience something and then they come back, unless it's a quick poll, a raise of hands, or a way to enter in a poll like Colin did with you at the beginning of this session. It's tough, especially if it's like a Y Combinator demo day and you've got 2 minutes and you're timed. It's tough to do this, but in most investor conversations, there is an opportunity. And certainly with customers, there's always an opportunity to sit down and ask questions. By the way, same thing if you're looking for co-founders or partners to join you, it starts with dialogue. So leading with a question so you can learn about what's important to the person you're speaking to is critical in situations where you can do it. And sometimes it's just good, even if you can interact back and forth, it's still nice to float out a question and let people think about it. So if I thought about the world of air purification, in the world of air pollution, I thought to myself, what could be a question? There's many different forms. But what I might do with a raise a hand might be something like, how many of you have been impacted by wildfires in the past year? And what I might get is some folks raise their hand. I live in San Francisco. So in Northern California and the West Coast, all the Pacific Northwest, all the way up to the West Coast of Canada, most people have been impacted by wildfires, even if it's just indirect smoke in the air, poor quality in the air. So what I might expect is then a slow trickle of people at first who can think about, actually, yes, there's a fire in my community, or maybe it's somebody who thinks about it for a second and is like, actually, yeah, we had to close down my daughter's school. This actually happened to me. My daughter's school had to shut down early in 2020, multiple days, because the air quality was poor. So what I might be getting is just a raise of hands, or maybe a 0 to 10. Think about it from a 0 to 10. How much has wildfire or air quality impacted you and your family's lives in the last year? And you could show it with your fingers. It's kind of silly to do it that way, but you can say from 0 to 10. It's fun. Silly can be fun as a way to just get people engaged right at the beginning. Show me from 0 to 10, how much has negative air quality impacted your family over the past year? We'll skip now to picture this. Picture this is just a way to get people visualizing something. Start with the words, picture this, or you can also use imagine. Imagine this, or imagine, picture this. It's really a shortcut to getting people to seeing something and feeling something immediately. And you can take people to pretty much anywhere you want. And you can have them picture 25 years ago. You can have them picture 25 years in the future. You can have them picture something really good or not so good. You can play around in many different ways with it. But as I thought about the molecule example, I might say, as climate change and wildfires continue to alter our lives, picture a world in which your family can breathe clean air in your home all the time. Pause. And I gave it a little precursor in the beginning. I gave it, as climate change and wildfires continue to impact our lives or alter our lives. I could do that, or I could just say, picture a world in which the air quality inside your home is always safe, and you can monitor it right on your smartphone. We're here today to talk about a solution for people like you and people like me who care about the air quality because we've got children at home or something like that. Pause right there. That's a picture this. You can do it a lot of different ways. You can start with the word imagine, picture this, or any variation of that, and get people seeing and feeling something right off the bat. Pause, and then take them to why we're here today, to talk about a solution. And the last one is just picture a story, or open with the story. I started to get into the fact that I have 2 young daughters. I mentioned it a couple of times. There's a lot of opportunity for me to lead with a story if I were to do it. The story could be about me personally. We'll get into some of this later, the next slide. But I could talk about my origin story. How did I get to this? If it's compelling. And some of the entrepreneurs I've worked with, it is major compelling. Something life-altering happened to them, or a life and death experience happened to them or a loved one. And it galvanized them. It solidified this urge that I've got to do something. And if that's the case, what an impactful way to start off a pitch is just lead with a story. Get to use stories to connect emotionally, which is the next topic on the know your audience. How do you want them to see? What do you want them to see, hear, and feel about your pitch? And that's important. You ask yourself the feel question. What do you want them to feel? It's so often it's the thing we lose. Sorry, I'm gonna go back into present mode. It's the thing we lose because we know all the stuff. We know everything. About the product or the service, we know the details. And as we're thinking about which phrases are going to land and which terminology and the order that we want to make our pitch deck, it's easy to forget that the point of this meeting is to form an emotional connection, some level of connection between what we're doing and what's important to either that investor, that customer, that potential partner that we're engaging. So how do you do it? How do you form an emotional connection? Well, that's where your origin story comes in, the beginning of how this all started. Or it could be, what makes you passionate about why you're doing it? Can you tell a story about why you're doing this? Or what's your why? Is it clear what your why is in the pitch? Sometimes it's not, because we're so focused on getting all the information in, all the numbers, all the details. That stuff's important, don't get me wrong. But what is your why? Is it clear why you're doing this? Why this matters? Share that why with people, because it connects. And the last point on know your audience is less is more. A reason I chose this as one of the points is, oftentimes when I'm working with somebody who's early developing a pitch or a story even to share, is so much of the work has been done already by the person on what data am I going to show? What details am I going to show? That stuff is important, but less is more. Minimal, impactful details. This is so hard to do because you know all the stuff, like I said in the previous slide. But all the stuff isn't going to get you the deal unless they're asking for all the stuff. It's the connection that matters. And the details help fuel and funnel or facilitate that connection. So it's choose easy to follow data points that are impactful to the specific unique audience that you're speaking to. It's adding metaphors around data, adding stories around data. You will lose your audience if you overload your pitch with too much information and too much data. And more importantly, you'll miss an important opportunity to connect emotionally with the audience. So we're at the halfway point right now. And what I'm going to do is, to give myself a quick break, and a sip of water, I'm going to share a quick video, an example of someone at Demo Day who at Y Combinator a few years back, in a pitch that I got a chance to work with her on. And after the video, I'm curious to hear from some of you in the chat of what stands out. Some of the things we've covered in the first 4 bullet points should stand out. Not all. It's not picture perfect. And she definitely made it her own way, along with her co-founders at the time. But some things should stand out. So I'm interested, as you're watching, type it into the chat on the Zoom. And when we come back in about 2 minutes, I want to see what stands out to you. Share.
Hello, we're Public Recreation. We're a new type of gym. We're all outdoors, and we offer unlimited classes like strength training and yoga for just $50 a month. Gyms make over $30 billion a year, but they're also insanely expensive to launch and to operate. We solved all of that by bringing our gyms outdoors. We're live with our first site in San Francisco, and we have dozens more in the pipeline. The response has been overwhelming. Since launching in May, we've grown over 30% week over week, signing up 450 new members. We went from 0 to 17,000. Space, because we provide a community benefit to their tenants. We use those savings to pay our instructors 2 to 3 times what they would make anywhere else, which means we get the best instructors and they're following. And since we don't do crazy brick and mortar build outs, our gyms, they're up and running for just $5K. There are thousands of parking lots and plazas and urban parks that we can operate in all across the country. And with our asset-light model, we can go everywhere and fast. So just like Uber built a transportation network without owning any cars, and Airbnb built an accommodation network without owning any hotels, we're building a network of gyms without owning any physical properties. We're public recreation. We're growing crazy fast. We're printing cash. Join us in building the gym of the future. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to take off the slide share for a minute and just check out what's in the chat. Lost audio. I apologize in that I realized I was shuffling my papers around and thought maybe I should mute myself. And then I realized I probably muted the video too. Okay. Lots of unrelated numbers. Too many. Rapid growth. Too many. Rapid growth sounds good. You'll have to stay unmuted. Thank you for that. Traction, momentum. I think most industries that have been impacted by the pandemic will need to change. Okay. Good analogy. We're printing cash. Notice that one got a laugh too. Good comparisons to Airbnb and Uber. Comparison between Airbnb. Yep. So that one really stood out. Stands out. Yoga's $50 a month. Grow. Yep. Good. Wow. We've got all kinds of comments in here. And so one thing I noticed when I saw it that we did not work on is there was a one-liner at the beginning, a one-liner that summarized, or it was maybe two sentences. We're public recreation, and it summarized everything about the business and what makes a line that summarizes about the business and then what makes the business difference, all in the first line. And I asked, by the way, this is Jennifer Petit, used to be in the Milestone Makers. That's how I first started working with her as well as her colleagues. And as a result of this pitch at YC Demo Day, she raised 1.5 million in investment as a result of that pitch. I asked, where did the one-liner come from? Because I thought it was kind of unique. And she said it was the best practice she got from YC, and that if you can lead with one line that summarizes your business, what makes it different, and lead with it up front, then your presentation starts, grabs everyone's attention, also kind of orients everyone to what you'll be talking about. So I like the fact that she started with it, and then she started with a number, which was a dollar figure number about the market, the gym market. So hopefully you could pull a thing or two out of that. With that, I'm going to go back to, what was her one line? It was, I can't remember it right off the top of my head, but at the end in Q&A, if we get a chance, we can go back and I'd be happy to share it. But it was just a line that differentiated what public recreation does. All right. So we're back to know yourself now, phase 2. And when I think about knowing yourself, it's about knowing your tendencies. And one of the big tendencies that we haven't addressed yet that is natural and normal for all of us as public speakers, as well as those of us making a pitch: nerves, anxiety, feeling not great about how it's going to go, or maybe imposter syndrome, or they're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about, or just general performance anxiety about doing a pitch. It is very normal, and just about everybody I ever work with has some form of it. So let's talk about it. I call it, I'm going to shift the picture out of the way. I call it handle nervousness with OPS, a 3-step process that I've developed after just working with a lot of different people. And I think these 3 things are probably the most useful and consistent for getting over nervousness before you pitch or even do public speaking of any type. Now, opener is what we covered thoroughly. It's open strong. The reason opener is the first one is because most people, when it comes to public speaking or pitching, are super nervous before it starts. And once they get going, most people will say, I sort of, excuse me, I normalize as I get going. Maybe a minute in, 30 seconds in, excuse me. Once the words start to come out, I start to feel more normal. I start to acclimate to the situation or whatever it is. People start to normalize after the beginning. So if that's the case, a good opener bridges that gap. Now, a good opener we just covered really thoroughly. Its side benefit is it can reduce nerves when we say it in our mind. 2 days before the pitch, a day before the pitch, the night before the pitch. You start to feel your heart pumping, your heart's pounding, and you start to hear the negative voice. What about this? What about that? Repeat your opener. Say it out loud. Say it to your significant other or your friend who's ever nearby. Call someone up and say it. Record yourself on your smartphone. Say it. Repeat it a bunch of times. And you'll get more and more comfortable feeling like, I love this opener. I chose it. Out of a laundry list of things I could have chosen, I chose this because I like this opener for me and for that audience. And when I get through with those few sentences, I feel like I'm going to start strong on the right foot and my nerves are going to begin to subside or in some situations completely go away. So a strong opener is more than about engaging. It's about grounding yourself and handling some nerves. The next one is in situations where that's not helping enough, or maybe the stakes are really big. And just before you start, you're going onto the Zoom, or let's say you're in person, and before it's your turn to go into the meeting, you can feel your heart pounding and nothing else is working. I go to the power pose. Now, if you are able to do this, I give you the challenge right now to stand up where you are and do the power pose. Here's what it is. I'll try to adjust my screen. It is standing up and getting big. By the way, if you've been sitting and listening to me for 30 minutes already, it's probably a good thing to stand up and stretch your legs either way. So I encourage you, stand up and feel strong. Wonder Woman or Superman, or put your arms out like this and breathe. Whatever makes you feel strong. Feet firmly planted on the ground. And I'm talking breathe deep for 30 to 60 seconds. And as you do it, feel the tension go from your brain and breathe down through your body into your feet and into the ground. Try it. There's a TED Talk on it by a woman named Amy Cuddy, and that's where I first became aware of it after a colleague told me about it. But I do this when nothing else works for me. And I think about the situation where I gave my brother's wedding toast, the most nervous I've ever been before anything public speaking, because everyone in the room was family or friends and they knew us. And I just wanted to be funny and heartfelt, and I just wanted it to go perfectly. And my heart, it just so much pressure I put on myself. My heart was going through my legs, through my chest. So what I did was I just went off privately, found some space, did the power pose, breathed. And that helped center me. Was I still nervous? Yeah. But let's get to shifting your mindset, because that's the last piece of this. I was nervous, but also, if I'm honest, I was excited. I mean, there's such a close, fine line between nerves and excitement. So shift your mindset, even if it's what you're telling yourself. I am excited. I'm excited. What's the difference? It's a form of energy that's flowing through us. It's just, I think, a slight shift. I mean, I've been excited, overly excited, and I kind of feel jittery. So shift your mindset from I'm nervous to excited based on what you're telling yourself. And by the way, I got this specific line from Jennifer. I asked her, can I have your permission to share that clip with the group I'm talking to at Nasdaq? She said, yeah, sure. And I said, anything that really stands out? And she said, yeah, I was really nervous. And I told myself, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm not nervous. I'm excited. And it worked for her. So I love that one. The other thing about shifting your mindset is I think there's this fear in all of us that we're going to look bad, or we're going to fail, or we're not going to know what's going on. Somebody's going to think we don't know what we're doing or what's going on. And another thing to shift too is that's not what people are thinking. And people don't want to sit and listen to someone do badly. That's just not the way it goes. They want to see your best. They want to see you do well. Even if they don't go for your concept or your idea, they want to see you do well. They want to hear you at your best. And let's be honest, in the world, in the past 18 months, how often are people multitasking while we're speaking to them? Now, I would love it if I could do a poll. I should do a poll right now, just to be honest, and there is no judgment on this. But how many of you are multitasking right now? How many of you have me at the background where you can hear me, or maybe I'm minimized somewhere, but you're doing other stuff? And I'd be doing the same thing if I were you. That is the norm right now. So that fear of, and I can see the chat coming in. I'm curious to see, are these people saying, no, actually, you're maximized on my screen, or are people agreeing with me? I got to take a quick check and just see. Yes, I am multitasking you. Thank you. I am not, but I am in the chat. Good. Okay. All right. So I don't know if that helps my ego or hurts my ego that everybody's like, yes, I am multitasking, man. Yes. But no, that's probably what I would be doing too. And the reason I bring that up is if you have an investor meeting, they're probably not multitasking, but there's still other stuff going on in their minds. They're thinking about lunch, or they're thinking about something going on at home, or an argument they may have gotten into with a colleague or friend. And there's just other stuff going on all the time for people. So let yourself off the hook a bit. Nobody's nitpicking you, really. Nobody is. They want to see you do well. So shift that mindset into I'm excited as best as you can. By the way, before we get off of this, nervousness is a big one. I'll spend entire sessions with people, executive coaching, one-on-one through their own specific scenario. So if in the Q&A you feel like, yeah, you haven't really touched on my scenario, feel free. We can talk about it in Q&A in a moment. All right, use your authentic voice and body language. This one is so key as a communicator. You sound a certain way when you're comfortable. When you're uncomfortable, you sound a totally different way. It's presenter voice. It can be robotic, or it can be serious. It's different. And if you want to take a quick test, this is sometimes what I'll do with clients. I'll have them take out your smartphone and just record yourself talking for like 30 seconds about your business or your company or something that is a more serious topic, quote unquote. Watch it back and just see what your tendencies are. Then record yourself for like 30 seconds or a minute, something short, talking about how you met your significant other or your best friend, somebody you feel love, somebody important to you, somebody you love. And just don't even think about it. Just be yourself and talk to the same screen, make eye contact, and see the difference. Watch that one back and you'll see sometimes subtle, sometimes not subtle differences in how you come across when you're in your comfort zone and when you're being, quote unquote, in presenter mode or serious mode. I've done this with many people, hundreds of people, workshops with like 60 people all together doing it at the same time. And it tends to be, yes, you see a dramatic difference. And the takeaway is always channel the excited, pumped up version of you being yourself. I say excited and pumped up because you're going to have adrenaline going, nervous excitement. So, I mean, you're going to be dialed up. Use it. Use that, but be yourself. I'm a hands talker. You've probably seen my hands moving a bunch. That's normal for me. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to amp it up even more when I'm trying to bring the energy on a presentation. If you're not, that's okay. That's totally okay. It's a best practice to use some hand gestures, but if it's just not you, don't fight it. Keep your eye level, about even with your camera. Just a couple other points for connecting with people and using your authenticity. Eye contact's important. It's kind of weird to connect emotionally to a green dot on my MacBook, but I'm trying to envision you. I'm trying to envision a group of people, or at least a person behind the green dot, because it helps me feel like I'm connecting. So if that helps, maybe you put a picture behind your laptop if you're speaking directly into the laptop, just as a reminder. Maybe it's a picture of your friend or your family or an object that makes you happy and smile. And then emphasize keywords. I hope I've done a good job of modeling that one today. Just a quick note on authenticity over technique. Authenticity is greater than technique when it comes to public speakers and great communicators. I love that line. My line, authenticity eats technique for breakfast. I think I stole someone else's line. It's strategy was the word and culture is the other word. But if you had to choose between being totally yourself or being totally, totally polished and textbook as a public speaker, err on the side of being totally yourself, because that is what connects with people. Remember to pause. I'm excited and I'm trying to remember to pause. But when your adrenaline is high, we tend to speed up. Remind yourself to pause after the important phrases. It's so key. I just want to go back to some of the openers I did at the beginning. Here's how it can sound. And this is what happens when I coach some of my clients. You get up in the moment, you're pumped up and you go a little faster than you realize. And this is how the number opener might sound. 7 million people die from air pollution, and it's not just outside air. We need to protect our families at home. That's me kind of being purposely bad, but also not pausing. Remember, this is it with pauses. 7 million people. That's how many deaths there are each year globally from air pollution. And it's not just the outside air. So I'm accentuating pauses there because I want those lines to land. I want you to feel something. And if I go too fast and don't pause, you might not connect with what I'm saying. Let your passion lead. That's the last thing I'll leave you with is so many times I work with people and we get the story crafted and we get the numbers right. And you've spent so much time just getting it right that you forget the most important part. And that is you are passionate about what you're doing. You are leading the charge. You are leading a company. You're at the beginning of leading a company. You're somewhere in it where you are passionate about it. And let that be the thing that comes across. Lead with it, with your excitement and your enthusiasm. And before we get to Q&A, there's the final, got through the list. A couple elements on building an emotional connection, because it's kind of been the theme. It's use that natural enthusiasm and passion. And we can touch on this in the Q&A, but when I work with entrepreneurs on a pitch, and this might be a little longer of a pitch, but we want to get that YC one-liner in where we can, plus the hook opener. We want to clearly articulate that problem plus our solution, and then we get into the details, if possible. And the best pitches weave back and forth between the business, the opportunity, the problem. You're going back and forth, but these are some other elements that you'll want to weave in to your talk. And with that, in a moment, I'm going to throw it over to Colin, but I appreciate how active you've been in the comments. I wish I had a chance to see more of what was going on in the comments because I was having some fun reading them. But let's open it up to Q&A with Colin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Very helpful. And it sounds like a lot of in the chat that people got pitches coming up. So this is very timely. Love it. Before we jump into Q&A, I just got a quick poll for the audience because, as you know, we provide responsive programming for the founders. So I'm going to give you guys a moment to put your questions in the Q&A box. But ahead of that, while we're waiting, just let us know what are the areas that you're looking forward to learn from based on this presentation and the others that you've seen. Is it finance, sales, marketing, pivoting, team, surviving? So just let us know, and we'll hope to offer these programs in the future. So really appreciate you guys taking a moment to share those results with you. And then we're going to jump into Q&A in a moment. So if you've got any questions directly for Tim, we're going to get to them. So I'm just going to share these results real quick. Finance looks like the top of the key. So yeah, perfecting your pitch definitely is related to that one. So hopefully, Tim, thanks to what you're teaching everybody today, that we'll get into it. Let's see. All right. So there's a question here on the pointers to be specific to, any pointers specific to phone pitches?
Absolutely. Well, obviously, if you're on a phone pitch, if you've got the ability to use visuals, you can email it before and still work along that way. That's a useful thing. If you can't, that's fine too. Really, it's about, can you tell a story? And you probably could barely even see me if my screen was mostly my slides. So it was almost like I was simulating a phone pitch in a way. So it's your tone, your volume, your authenticity, your passion, the story, the opener, all of that stuff still applies to a phone. However, one other thing I'll note too is the interaction piece is even more critical on the phone. Is ask questions if you get the opportunity to listen to the person, because you can't see any nonverbals. You can't see how their body language looks.
I love that. That's great advice. And there's been a couple questions around, what item on the most important thing, the highlighted point that you talked about. So what's your recommendation on how to really dive deep into understanding if it's a quote, if it's the number, like any guidance on a little bit of self-discovery there?
Yeah, I think I see that question too in the Q&A. And the way I look at it is my goal for telling you all of those techniques is for you to feel like you can use them all. And then it becomes, which one's more impactful intuitively. And by that, I mean, is there a really strong data point that data point just tells the story or the reason that talks about the opportunity? You can feel it. And if it's our origin story, this thing just knocks it out of the park. You can kind of feel it, and maybe you can't. So try it on a few friends, run it by people, and you'll see people will just gravitate towards one or two of the options. And then if you're in a situation where it's like, God, these are all landing, wow, an embarrassment of riches. You're in a great situation if that's it. It's just choose the one that you feel best about. I hope that helps, because I didn't really answer it, but the answer is your audience, your business, and your own comfort makes the decision.
Yeah. And I think, it's good advice on try them all out and see which one feels best, and then you'll know. Let's see, there was a couple of questions that came in around, speaking to investors that don't necessarily know the business well. And you touched to this, but can you give us a little advice around speaking to an audience who may not understand the industry, the problem, the tech?
Yeah, that's me a lot when I'm working with milestone makers. I don't understand the minutia. I mean, I'm not an investor, and I'm also not well versed in their area. So that's one where talk to people who are not in your industry. Talk to friends, family, colleagues, people who can give you their honest opinion on, as you're describing the pain point, the problem, does this make sense? Because often it just doesn't. So here's a quick trick. If you're thinking about, how do I describe this to somebody who's just not familiar with it? Ask yourself, well, first of all, try to describe it as best as you can. And then in your preparation, ask yourself, okay, well, what's important about what I just said? And then that might filter it down a bit. And then you can ask yourself that question a couple more times, right? Of this filtered version, what's important about that? Okay, maybe one more layer. And usually within 3 times of asking yourself the question of like, what's important about this? What's important about that? It's like the 5 whys. You kind of just distill it down into something that is more broad, where the general population can grab onto it more. So the summary of that answer is, it's paint that problem extra clear. Otherwise, it's a non-starter.
Yeah, I love that. Let's see another question here. Thanks for the questions, folks. Keep them coming. We'll try to get to all of them. When we talk to an underwriter, a venture capitalist, investment banker, are there different advice for each stages? Which I think is a little detailed, but I believe you touched base on this a little bit on just knowing the audience.
Yeah. This is not my area of expertise of the different stages, because I haven't been in that chair. I've just coached a lot of people who have. And so my gut, without being an expert in that area, is the initial conversations more general, more vision, more making sure the problem is really clear, more demonstrating what makes you special and different through how you're delivering. And then secondary, or as you move down that line that you just described, my assumption would be you're getting more detailed for what each of those functions, people in those functions would need, would be my guess.
I love that. And a couple people have asked about decks, and there's tons of information on the best practices on decks. So we didn't cover that today, but somebody's asking on the importance of a deck or any supporting materials in the first meeting.
By the way, deck is super important. I mean, I sort of downplayed it because there's, like Colin said, there's so many resources online. If you just Google pitch deck, there's so many things that come up. But the importance of a pitch deck on the first meeting, I think having the pitch deck in your back pocket is something that makes you feel more confident. So if it ends up being more of a conversation, and particularly what I'm thinking about is if it's a get to know you, if it's somebody, if you're looking for a co-founder and it's like, is this a chemistry match? You may not pull the pitch deck out. Or if it's a first conversation with an investor and you maybe have a pre-existing relationship, you maybe don't need to pull the deck out during that. But if you need to reference it, it's there.
I love that. And it's about creating an emotional connection, right?
Totally.
When creating a story to elicit an emotional response, what's the most difficult emotion to achieve?
Wow, that's a good one. Yikes. I laugh because I'm like, I don't know that I have the answer to this one. And I wish I could ask the person a follow-up question on, what's important to you as you think about your story, because that's probably the one. It's what's most important to you. And that's the one to convey.
Yeah, that's great advice. And we're almost coming up on time, but yes, we will get you guys all a link to the replay, so don't worry about that. We'll send it in a follow-up. But Tim, we're running out of time, so I want to thank you personally for just contributing your time, talent, and treasure of wisdom to everyone on this call and for our community at large. So from everyone on our team and from everyone in attendance, we really, really appreciate you sharing your tips, tricks, and some of this awesome stuff. So one final takeaway from all the experience on helping all the entrepreneurs that you've worked with on how to perfect a pitch.
So I can leave it with one final thought on this one? Yeah, good.
It.
One final thought would be, and I've said it clearly, but people are investing, assuming the business makes sense and there's a market for it and there's a need and you're differentiated, assuming the fundamentals are there, then the next thing or the next important thing on the tiering of importance is you. It's do you have a vision and can you sell it? Can you show your passion for something? So your delivery, your ability to connect with somebody is so important. And it's all about finding your authentic voice and just being you and leading with your passion and your enthusiasm. And that's the one thing. It's interesting. The more buried in details we get, the more that part kind of gets buried down too. So remember, let your passion and your enthusiasm lead, because that's what people are going to feel.
That's great advice. Well, thanks again, Tim, and thanks for everybody who are on the call today. We've got some great upcoming webinars, so people look out for those. But thank you all for joining us, Tim. Really appreciate the time, and we look forward to welcoming you all back online soon. Thanks again.